What's going on, baseball fans? We are back at it here at the Baseball Banter Broadcast. And on this installment, we're diving into a fascinating new look at Cooperstown. And to help us do that, we are thrilled to welcome Louis H. Schiff, the author of Attorneys in the Baseball Hall of Fame, a book that reveals the legal minds that help shape the game of baseball and sometimes change the way that game looks. And it's absolutely a game that we love wholeheartedly here on the channel. And we're pleased to welcome Louis.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me. Jeremy, Chris, pleasure to be here tonight. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
No, absolutely. It's our pleasure to have you on board. So, as we kind of begin, I just want to ask the question right off the bat, kind of what sparked the idea of the book specifically about lawyers in the Baseball Hall of Fame?
The idea started when I was finishing up the first book that I wrote that's used in law school called Baseball and the Law Cases and Material. And when Professor Jarvis and I finished that textbook, I mentioned to him, I have an idea for a new project. And the project, I already started doing the research, the project would be to do a story about each of the members of the Baseball Hall of Fame who are attorneys. And Professor Jarvis, he's written about 24, 25 books already. He said to me that really he knew of the big lawyers in the Hall of Fame. He goes, really, there's 11 attorneys in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And then I rattled off who the 11 attorneys in the Baseball Hall of Fame were. And he said, that sounds like a great idea, but I just don't have any time to do it now. I've got some other writing commitments. If you want to do the book without me, go ahead and do it. It sounds like a great project. But I didn't do it because at the time I was still a full-time county court judge trying cases every day. I just didn't have, as they now say, the bandwidth to write a book, to edit a book, to research a book, and to do my day job. So unlike Kennesaw Mountain Landis, who decided to try to do two jobs at once, which got him into trouble, I didn't do anything until about 3 years ago when Professor Jarvis, we talk all the time, but he reached out to me and he said, hey, Lou, do you still want to do that book about the attorneys in the Hall of Fame? And I said, yeah, I'd love to. And he said, yeah, I have time. Let's see what we can do. And so we reached out to our publisher, McFarland. And for those of you that are baseball aficionados, you'll know that McFarland publishes a lot of great books on baseball. And we presented the idea to them. They loved the idea. And they said, go ahead, do the book. And so then Bob primarily put together their team. And it's a team of 10 law professors. And I count myself as one of the law professors or law librarians because I'm an adjunct law professor at Mitchell Hamblin School of Law in St. Paul. And I've been on their faculty for almost, I think it's 20 years now as an adjunct. So we put together the 10 professors ranging from, one's a dean of a law school, some are law librarians, men and women from all over the country. And they each chose a chapter they wanted to do. Bob and I chose Landis, and I chose Tony La Russa. So it's like I did the first and the last chapter. And then the other professors chose who they wanted to do. And then Bob set the tone as far as how to write each chapter. This is not a book, as you're aware, that talks in great legalese. There aren't any cases to read. Somebody's compared it to a Sports Illustrated type story where it runs, each chapter can run, 12 to 17 pages long. The book is only about 250 pages long. We have 1,300 endnotes, which support support our findings. And so everybody took a chapter, and it's written in one voice. And when I say one voice, I mean, so if you read one chapter and then jump to another, it almost reads as if only one person wrote the book, because it's set up in such a fashion, Chris and Jeremy, that the reader doesn't realize they're reading a different person's work. It's truly written in one voice. And credit to Professor Jarvis, who painstakingly made sure that it followed that pattern. And then my editing portion was to make sure for baseball accuracy, make sure that you didn't have any errors in there as far as baseball type related things. But the purpose of the book was to educate baseball fans about what a law degree did to help enshrine 11 men in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And so I set out I was very naive when I set out researching Kennesaw Mountain Landis, because even as a baseball fan and as an attorney and as a judge and a previously published author, I wasn't aware of the depth of misconduct, for example, that Kennesaw Mountain Landis was behind. Most people probably know the story. If I say to you, Chris, tell me 2 things you know about Kennesaw Mountain Landis, you're a former paralegal, what are you going to say?
Let's see.
Put you on the spot. There's no wrong answers, and we're not being.
Yeah, when I think of that name, I think of the of the times when baseball was, you know, racially segregated, where perhaps things like that, where there was no, I don't, was there free agency? I mean, there was just a number of issues that I could see. He that at the very beginning of baseball and the law that he would have been, handling.
Right. And how about you, Jeremy? What's like 1 or 2 things that come to mind before you looked at the book that you said, this is what I know about Kennesaw Mountain Landis?
Well, I knew he was the first commissioner, and he dealt with the 1919 Black Sox scandal, which is why he was put into the role of the first commissioner.
Okay. And so your breadth of knowledge was where I was 6 years ago. Okay. So you think of Kennesaw Mountain Landis, you think of this hero of a man who came in and saved baseball and came riding in on a white horse and saved baseball. And some of that's true, but then there's the underbelly of some of the things that he did that got him there that in the lens of 2025 are not acceptable. And one of the things that he did, and when I talk to lawyers and I talk to judges, and I've done that a lot in the last 40 some odd years, I always ask this question, and I knew this answer. Why do we have a code of conduct for judges? Why do we have a code of conduct for judges? And the one-word answer, and it surprises people, is baseball. The reason we have and I see you're smiling, which is good. The reason we have a code of conduct for baseball, because you're absolutely right. Chris, you're right. He became commissioner at a time when baseball was at its lowest. Jeremy points out that this is during the Black Sox scandal. And at the time, there was the National Commission made up of 3 men who were trying to run baseball, but they weren't running it. You have to add an extra letter in it. They were not running it. They were ruining it. And so they were ruining baseball. The trust that the public had for the American pastime, and it was truly the American pastime at that time because it was the sport of our country. And so at the time that this is going on, the Black Sox, the White Sox, throw the World Series to the Cincinnati Reds. Fans are leaving. We're not going to watch the game. We need something to save us. In comes Kennesaw Mountain Landis, who is a federal judge from Chicago, who's a baseball fan and who had a reputation of not taking any nonsense. And he was then elected by the owners of the team to be the commissioner, with the understanding from him that I'm the czar, whatever I say goes, and you have to follow my edicts. And if you don't like it, then I guess you can fire me, but I'm going to sign a contract and you basically can't get rid of me. He served until his death in 1945. During his time as commissioner, he refused to leave as commissioner, as a federal judge. He's getting paid about $17,000 a year to be a federal judge. It's a lot of money back in the 19 teens, early 1920s. Job security for the rest of his life. Theodore Roosevelt appointed him to the bench. I knew that, but most people don't know that he had 2 brothers, William and Charles, who were congressmen from Indiana. And these 2 guys, with the help of President Roosevelt, got him appointed to the bench. Not only got appointed to the federal bench, he was only 39 years old when he got appointed to the federal bench. he was nominated and appointed in the same day. Now, if we look at it in the lens of 2025, we know that that's probably an impossible task, to be nominated and appointed in the same day. So he gets nominated, gets appointed in the same day, and people are going to assume that he's going to give up his federal judgeship. He doesn't give up his federal judgeship. As you read in the book, there's a representative that has an axe to grind with the judge because of a prior ruling the judge made. And before long, lawyers, attorneys are screaming, and Congress is starting to scream, you can't do both jobs. And Landis basically says, well, sure, I can do both jobs. I'm very confident in doing both jobs. The American Bar Association at their annual meeting condones him and censures him. And at the same time, this very same time, the United States Congress is drawing up articles of impeachment. And then it's at that time where he turns around and says, I really don't need both jobs. I'm going to go ahead and give up my federal judgeship and take and work harder at the $45,000 a year job as a commissioner. So as a result of all of that, the American Bar Association passes a code of conduct defining what judges can and can't do when it comes to second jobs. Judges are allowed to write books. Judges are allowed to teach. But judges are not allowed to let their writing activities or their teaching activities interfere with their job, which is to be a judge. Kennesaw Mountain Landis could be found at the ballpark when he was supposed to be on the bench. Other things that people don't know about him, he delivered a speech called The Conservative Man, in which he condemned immigrants, Italian immigrants and German immigrants in our country. Very critical why they didn't belong here. And if you put it in the lens of today's things, we can see there's some similarities. While he was commissioner, there was a scandal involving the Detroit Tigers and having they were allowed to finish third place. There was a game that may have been thrown to allow them to finish third place ahead of the Yankees so they could receive the bonus money. He looked the other way on that. He looked the other way on some things that Ty Cobb did. And to be candid, in today's terms, many people have referred to him as a racist. He had the ability, while commissioner, to integrate baseball, and he refused to even discuss it. And just a few years ago, 2020, I believe, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Chris or Jeremy, there was enough pressure put upon Major League Baseball to say that the most valuable player award is no longer going to be named in his honor, and they took his name off the most valuable player award. So these are some of the things that you'll learn about him. One of the things that he became a lawyer without graduating law school. He then later went back to law school because he learned that he couldn't really be a good lawyer if he hadn't gone to law school. He didn't graduate high school. Many people don't know that about him as well. He had some other connections in Washington, D.C. that helped him become a federal judge. And to his credit, he did try one case before the United States Supreme Court early on. He lost that case, but nevertheless, he tried a case in the United States Supreme Court. So these are some of the things. So we start piecing some of these folks together and talking about, well, how did baseball help them? What did they do? Certainly, Kennesaw Mountain Landis is in the Hall of Fame for what Major League Baseball wants you to know, that he was the man that solved the Black Sox issue. But if you take a real deep dive, people today will say that he was a racist. People today will say that he was anti-immigrant. Those things, they're there for your reading. They're there to look at, and you can make your own decisions. But in the light of 2025, if he was up now to be in the Hall of Fame, would he get in the Hall of Fame? I don't have a vote. I don't know if you folks have a vote, but that would be up to you as to whether or not he would come in. So he was attorney number one. One attorney that is so deserving of being in the Hall of Fame is Branch Rickey. Branch Rickey, when he was a college coach, had a black ball player, an African-American ball player on his team. And there were instances where he had to sneak him in and out of hotels. And there was one instance where that he refused to allow his college team to play unless the other school was going to allow his player to play. So he stood for things very moral. As you know, he was instrumental in signing Jackie Robinson, and he's in the Hall of Fame because he's an executive. Throughout his career, he did the right thing. You know, he was a businessman, and he used his business and his understanding of the law. People, if I asked you, where do you think Branch Rickey practiced law? If I told you he practiced law in Idaho for about a year or so, people smile. They go, Idaho? Why did he go to Idaho to practice law? Well, he went to Northwestern in Chicago, and he was at some fraternity, met up with some fraternity brothers from law school, and they thought that Idaho was the perfect place for location and climate to practice law. And they went there, and the practice lasted about a year or so, and the pull of baseball was getting to him, and so he left the practice, and he went into baseball full time. What's interesting, you know, he's credited with inventing the minor leagues. But for his law degree, he may not have invented the minor leagues the way he did. So before he, quote, invented the minor league system, if Chris, you owned a minor league team, and Jeremy, you owned a minor league team, and I was a major league team, I would buy players from you if I wanted them to play for my team, if I was a major league team. It's kind of basically the way it was. Well, his idea was more like a conglomerate. So he takes his legal acumen in business, and he realizes, if I could own the minor league teams, I could make money from those minor league teams, and I wouldn't have to pay Chris and Jeremy if I had a ball player that I wanted to play for my team. Mm-hmm. So he started doing that. He was the first to start all these other teams where he could draw from them and use them to wherever he needed them and not have to pay anybody else for these ball players. And he kind of took a business approach on how to run a larger corporation where you have the home office, Brooklyn at this point, and then all these other subdivisions, all these other teams, like what Jackie Robinson was playing in Montreal, that was owned by the Brooklyn Dodgers at the time. He didn't have to go out and buy Jackie Robinson. He had already signed him to a minor league deal before that. So those are some of the things that he did.
No, it's definitely interesting stuff for sure.
Yeah, definitely the difference between the romance of baseball and the business of baseball.
You won't read on any of their major league plaques what they did in the law. But when you start looking at the Walter O'Malley with the Dodgers, Walter O'Malley is credited with bringing the Dodgers, obviously, from Brooklyn to Los Angeles. And depending who you talk to, he's either a hero or an SOB. Mm-hmm. Now, to the people in Los Angeles, not all the people, but to many of the people in Los Angeles, he's a hero. But if you speak to the Mexican-American community, where Chavez Ravine was built, he was an absolute awful individual.
Right.
And there's a great book, and if you can get him as a guest, Eric Nussbaum wrote a book a couple of years ago called Stealing Home. And it's the story on how the Brooklyn Dodgers moved to Los Angeles and how the city and the county of Los Angeles helped the Dodgers take over the land from the Mexican Americans who were living there. And some of the folks were physically removed from their property in order for Dodger Stadium to be constructed. So you look at things like that and you say, is that really a person worthy of being in the Hall of Fame? Somebody that some people say conspired to displace a group of people who didn't want to leave. And so, but he's in the Hall of Fame. And then you get to somebody like John Montgomery Ward. John Montgomery Ward was not the first person enshrined in the Baseball Hall of Fame. He wasn't enshrined until 1964, but he's the first person in the Hall of Fame attorney-wise. So if you do a timeline on who became an attorney first, he became an attorney. And he has an interesting story, and we delve into this, that but for a trade, he probably wouldn't have become an attorney, and he wouldn't have started the Players League. He was playing for the Providence Grays, and I'm giving you the shortened version, and he gets traded to the Giants, the New York Gothams. He doesn't want to be traded because he likes living in Providence. But he gets traded, and because of the trade, he goes to law school at Columbia. He gets his law degree in the off seasons. And then after that, he, with his smarts of being a lawyer, he forms the Players League and the first Players Union. And they were on the verge of becoming, and they were, the third major league until they ran out of capital. But for a year, they were very competitive. Many of the ball players were grateful for him doing this because right before that, in the courts, you asked about the reserve clause, free agency. The courts, as early as the late 1800s, were ruling that ball players, the reserve clause was good, and the ball players didn't like the fact that they weren't getting paid as much. They can go back to the farms and work the farms and make more money on the farm than they could as a ball player. That was their choice. Baseball's always been a business. John Montgomery Ward got active there. Many of the players disliked him. He became, and later in life, he became a very good golfer. Had some issues. He thought about running for public office. They thought about running him for public office on Long Island. They decided not to do that. But he's credited with being the first attorney to stand up to what was then the American and National League, not Major League Baseball, because Major League Baseball really doesn't get incorporated until almost 100 years later. But he's the first person that basically challenges them, loses in the courts, wins. He takes a W because he was able to start another league and compete with the other teams. But the major problem he had was he had no stadiums to play in, and so he was really renting the stadiums from some of the major league owners to compete. And that eventually fell on its face because they just couldn't afford the funding anymore. But he was a heck of a ball player. He was a two-way ball player. We talk about Ohtani now being the greatest player of all time. We don't have any videos to see how John Montgomery Ward played. I read an article not too long ago where somebody said that he was obviously one of the best two-way players of his time. And because there are no real videos, movies to see him play, we have really nothing to compare it to. But he was certainly, he made it into the Hall of Fame because of his playing ability. So you have Landis as a commissioner, and you have Branch Rickey as an executive, and Walter O'Malley as an executive, and you have John Montgomery Ward as a ball player. Those are four of the folks.
Oh yeah, it's incredible. Absolutely incredible to see kind of the diversity across the board in those 11 players that you mentioned. In doing the research for this book, was there any moment that kind of stood out more than the others in terms of how deep law shaped baseball's evolution in today's game?
Well, yes. So I had the privilege of doing the Tony La Russa chapter. And Tony is the only member of the Baseball Hall of Fame who's an attorney that's still alive. So in doing his chapter, I'm doing a history, but I'm also doing current events. And so all of our other co-authors had to rely on books and newspaper clippings and other research like that. I had the pleasure to actually speak to him on several occasions. And the first time, we have a mutual friend who he went to law school with, who, and he went to law school at Florida State, the only attorney in the Baseball Hall of Fame that went to a law school in the South. Every lawyer in the Baseball Hall of Fame either went in the North or the Midwest. There's nobody west of Chicago that went to law school that's in the Baseball Hall of Fame. They all went to Northeast schools or Chicago law schools, Cincinnati law schools. Tony went to Florida State University, and my first conversation with him, he picked up the phone and I said, "Hello, Mr. LaRussa." This isn't in the book, but this is the moment where I said, "This guy's a really great guy." And I had already done a lot of research. He wasn't my first call. He was one of the last things I wanted to do to put things together. And the first thing he said, "Who is this?" I told him. He goes, call me Tony. He could have stuck with the Mr. LaRussa part. He said, "Mr. LaRussa was my father. Just call me Tony." And I spoke to him. It was during spring training. You can hear the announcer. He's in Arizona. He's sitting in the Chicago White Sox box taking notes. And he says, "Excuse me for a minute. It's in the late innings. I got to take some notes. We're bringing in different ball players." And so here he is. He's talking to me and he's watching the game and he's taking notes. He's a special advisor for Reinsdorf, and he's doing his job, and he's talking to me. And what I wanted to learn from him was, why did you choose to go to law school? And more importantly, how did law school help you in your career? So I'm old enough to remember Tony LaRussa as a young player. And I was all of like 10 years old when he started playing ball. And he didn't play for very long, but I had you get a baseball card and you have it and you go, "Oh, I know." You look at the back of the card. He was signed in about 1963. He went to school in Tampa. He was signed as what they called a bonus baby, which is kind of like a Rule 5 player in the sense that if you're signed as a bonus baby, you have to play on the major league team. And if you're signed as a Rule 5 player, you have to play on the major league team. His parents insisted that he get a college education. His mom and dad worked in a cigar factory in Ybor City in Tampa. His mom and dad met there. Spanish was his first language. So, growing up in Tampa, Spanish was his first language. And he was a really gifted ball player. And the A's signed him out of high school. But his mother insisted that they leave some money so he can get a college education, which he did at the University of South Florida. And there was also enough money for Tony to buy himself a convertible. So they sign him, they give him his money, he gets a convertible, money's put away for college. And he spends his first year in the major leagues and he doesn't play much because he's a rookie, and most rookies don't play much. And because he was a bonus baby, he had to stay with the team the whole year. He had a promising career. He gets hurt one winter home in Tampa playing pickup sports, and he never really fully recovered. He bounces around and he realizes that he's going, and he gets his college degree while playing ball in the off season. And then he realizes, my career is basically over. I'm going to give it one more shot. And he has a decent season with the Atlanta Braves minor league team, but they never called him up. And so he decides to go to law school because he had friends that went to law school, and he realized he needed to do something, and he thought he'd be a trial lawyer. This is the shortened version. He chooses Florida State because, Stetson University College of Law is in Tampa, where he's from. At the time that he decided to go to law school, Florida had Stetson University Law School, University of Florida, Florida State, the University of Miami, and Nova Southeastern was just starting. There were only about 5 law schools. Every law school in the state accepted him. But he went to Florida State because they allowed him to put baseball ahead of his law studies, in the sense that they let him take time off for baseball. So it took him about 5 years to finish. And I had the pleasure to talk to Tony in depth about how he was focused, how he was driven, and then he started mentioning folks that I knew. One of his professors, Charles Earhart, was on one of his professors. I worked with Professor Earhart when I was the Associate Dean of the Florida Judicial College. He was one of our professors. Professor Earhart is the one that said to him, you got to finish your law degree because you have to have something to fall back on. So that's what he did. And he started coaching. He was in the White Sox organization. He was coaching and going to law school. And then an opening happens where they fire the manager halfway through the season and they make him an offer, and he comes up and he does a good job second half of the year. He gets signed. And so Mike Veck, Bill Veck's son, Mike was there when Tony was signed. Mike dispelled a rumor. The rumor was that Tony was signed because Bill can get him inexpensively. Mike tells me that the reason why Bill Veck signed Tony La Russa was that he really thought that Tony was above everybody else when it comes to intelligence. And he thought he was an intellect. That was the word that Mike used, that he was an intellect. And so he signs him to manage the team because of his law background. And so one of the things that Bill Veck said to Tony, you've got to, when you pass the bar exam, you got to get sworn in. And in the middle of his first full season, Tony finds out he passed the bar exam. A local judge, a federal judge in Chicago, who's also like a season ticket holder, swears Tony in the morning. And then in the afternoon, he's being interviewed by Harry Carey. There's a great interview that we cite to in the book. It's on YouTube. And Harry Carey is congratulating him for graduating law school that day. Tony's too polite to correct him, but it was the day that he got sworn in. And so Tony credits his law degree with becoming an excellent manager because it was the persistence and the study and the preparation that made him become great. I had a chance to talk to the only lawyer he ever worked with. His name is Bill Dooley. He's still over in Tampa. He's in his mid 80s, and he hired Tony. Tony was supposed to try a case as a lawyer, but he got called into spring training. It was going to be a guardianship case on a woman's competency, and Tony handed the ball off to someone else, and Tony never stepped foot in a courtroom as a lawyer. He stayed with that law firm, the Bill Dooley law firm in Sarasota, for probably 15 years before they took his name off the page, because he really wasn't going to come back. By then he was an accomplished manager, and it was his law degree. One of the law students, the person that connected Tony and I, a gentleman by the name of Scott Tozian, who also practices law. He's in Tampa. He practices law. He does ethics work. He told me that Tony was probably the most hardworking student that he ever saw, that he was just totally driven to get good grades. Tony graduated in the top 25% of his class. Probably could have been on law review, but for the fact that he was also involved in baseball. During one of Tony's last years in baseball, when he was with the Pelicans in New Orleans, Professor Earhart arranged for him to get a judicial clerkship with a judge that had been a student of his, but the timing just didn't work out. Otherwise, Tony would have had a judicial internship in New Orleans. So, fascinating guy. One of the things that people don't realize that's credited to him, those little blue checks on Twitter? Now it's X. The blue check on Twitter should be called the Tony La Russa check mark, because somebody was impersonating Tony. He contacted Twitter, threatened a lawsuit, maybe filed a lawsuit, and Twitter then started to verify the names of the people that were there with the little blue check mark. So Tony is responsible for the blue check marks on Twitter.
What an interesting fact. That's awesome.
So that covers about five of the 11. If you want to learn about the other 6, this is going to show up backwards, but here it is. attorneys in the Baseball Hall of Fame. Actually, McFarland's is doing, for all their books between now and December 1st, if you go online at McFarland's, they're offering a 35% discount on every book that they publish. And the code is Holiday 25, 25 being the year, not 25% discount, but Holiday 25 between now and December 1st for all of their books.
No, absolutely. We'll have that tag down in the description below this video for sure. Now, I did want to ask one more question here.
As much as you want.
In your opinion, what would be your thoughts on the most important legal turning point in baseball history?
Yeah.
From a business point, it's federal baseball that was decided in 1922 by the United States Supreme Court. The short of the case is that baseball was accused of violating antitrust laws.
Right.
And Kennesaw Mountain Landis was still, there's one other thing about Kennesaw Mountain Landis. There was a famous case that he contacted Theodore Roosevelt about, and which would be, this is so wrong. Okay. When you're a judge, you can't reach out and say, this is the case I want. But anyway, he managed to get a case simply because he wanted that case for whatever his reasoning was for publicity. But that's such a violation of the code of conduct. But then again, they didn't have a code of conduct at that point. But I would say federal baseball, from the standpoint that it's still good law. 103 years later, it's still good law, even though the United States Supreme Court has said that it's up to Congress to decide. And the Supreme Court has said in the Roselli case, basically, that if we had to decide federal baseball all over again, we probably wouldn't decide it the same way. So they gave them the antitrust exemption because they didn't think it was interstate commerce the way we know it today. The ride on a train from one city to another, they said, wasn't playing of the game. Broadcasting had not yet come in, so it wasn't broadcasted from one state to another state. So they just said each individual game was its own entity and not part of interstate commerce. And twice it was challenged in the Toulson case in the 1950s, and then again in the Kurt Flood case. But since collective bargaining, a lot of what the Supreme Court has done has kind of, for lack of a better word, been eroded by some of the contracts between the players' union and Major League Baseball. But they still have that antitrust exemption, which other sports doesn't have. So from a business standpoint, it's certainly that. From a cultural standpoint, it was the long-awaited integration of baseball. That certainly changed baseball. In the last few years, the most important decisions that baseball has made, I think, this is more international players. Baseball did away with a bunch of minor league teams, and that was a business decision, so they would save money. That again, baseball. Don't let anybody fool you. The baseball is a business, and that's what I teach a baseball law class, and that's the emphasis I talk to my students, my law students, about. Baseball's a fun game, and we all, students that take it mostly grew up playing it or watching it or both. But don't fool yourself. Baseball is a $1 billion plus business, and the owners are in it to make money. That's their job, and the public relations department of Major League Baseball does everything it can to sanitize the mistakes that it's made. We have Jackie Robinson Day once a year, where they emphasize what happened after he became a player on the Brooklyn Dodgers. They don't talk about the years of racism that Major League Baseball had, and how there were black African American ball players in Major League Baseball up until the gentleman's agreement in the early 1900s not to allow these men to play baseball. They don't dwell on that. And we've incorporated, when I say we, baseball's incorporated Negro League statistics now in the last couple of years, which should have been done a long time ago.
Agreed.
But baseball doesn't dwell on the racism. Baseball doesn't dwell on the sexism. Baseball doesn't want to dwell on that. Why did it take so long to get a woman to be a Major League Baseball umpire? There were lawsuits in the 1970s regarding women umpires and the fights that there were. There was a case out of New York where the New York Labor Commission said that women are just as capable of men to be umpires. But if that was 1973, 73, 74, so 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I mean, we're talking 50 years later. Major League Baseball doesn't like to talk about Melissa Lutke and how she was wrongly deprived her right to report. If you read her book, Locker Room Talk, it's Rutgers University Press. It's an accounting of the discrimination that she had to deal with, even though during that 1977 World Series, the Yankees and the Dodgers both said, we don't mind if she comes in and reports. It was Bowie Kuhn that denied her access. And but for the fact that the Yankees were playing in a city-owned facility, his edict may have stood, but the federal court said, no, this is an equal access right under the United States Constitution, and this building is owned by the city of New York, and you have to do equal access. And so Elizabeth Manriquez wrote the chapter on Bowie Kuhn, and she concludes the chapter that basically Bowie Kuhn never made a good decision in all his years of being a commissioner. I think something that's hurting baseball right now is the gambling issue.
Oh, yeah.
Is anybody surprised that we have, and I'll say there's 2 players right now that are alleged to have purposely thrown a pitch that they weren't supposed to throw? Is anybody surprised that something like this has happened? If you're surprised, raise your hand, and then you've been living under a rock.
Yep.
And so this year, I believe it was in Toronto that maybe it was just on the TV screens, they may have it, but it said DraftKings on the outfield wall. Baseball,
Over.
I don't think you can put the toothpaste back in the tube. And again, that's a business decision. And now you're reading stories about ball players who are getting threatening messages on social media because they didn't get a single one day, or they struck out one day, and they're getting death threats, and their families getting death threats because of it. That's wrong. That culture's wrong. If people want to bet, I think it's gone too far, but maybe I'm just too old of a guy. But the other thing that I think is interesting is, what would Landis have done with these allegations? Okay, now, Landis waited until the jury came back, and then when the jury came back not guilty, he then suspended them for life. The commissioner's office hasn't done anything yet. Baseball hasn't started yet, but what's the commissioner's office going to do?
Yep.
I don't know. What would you do if you were commissioner, Chris?
Suspend them for life.
Would you wait until more facts come out?
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, you probably have to. Yeah, you probably would have to do that. But, as you say, it was inevitable that something like this was going to come up. It's shocking, but it'll be, we have to know how they're going to handle it. And soon. Because it keeps going.
Yeah.
They have to address it soon.
Jeremy, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously we have to have all the facts in to be able to make a completely valid decision.
Yeah.
But gut reaction is when you defile the integrity of the game in this way, there should be a punishment, right? And
Right.
obviously, we think back to Pete Rose gambling, right? Banned for life. Rob Manfred just recently turned over that decision to keep him banned, and now he's putting, in my opinion, passing the buck to the committee that's going to vote on it at the end of next season. For me, it's just, if we don't uphold the integrity of the game, what kind of game are we going to have in the future?
Yeah.
Right.
Pete Rose is an interesting subject because folks say, well, he never bet against his team, but he bet on his team. And so if I'm a bookie and Pete Rose isn't betting on the Reds on Tuesday, but he bet on them on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, what does that
Yeah.
tell me? And he lied at first. He just lied about whether he bet on baseball or not. And I think that I'll put my judge's hat on. When I went to sentence people, and there was no contrition, and they doubled down on things that that they did because the proof came out, you think differently, and you might even sentence a little bit differently because you have certain discretion on what the sentencing can be. A kid comes in, 18-year-old kid, first time shoplifting, comes in, gee, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done it. You try to help out the kid. You really do. You don't want the person's life to be ruined over something like that. Will you learn by it? Can we give you community service? We'll set you up in a program. 6 months later, if you complete it, come back to me. The case can get dismissed. Pete Rose had those opportunities with Bart Giamatti and other commissioners, and he just doubled down on I didn't do it. And so I don't know. The guy, I don't know. I don't have to make that decision.
Yeah. Hey, can I ask a question about you?
Sure.
What was your path to this book? Were you? Did you grow up playing baseball? What is your?
Yeah, on a 9-man team, I was the 12th player.
I suspected you might say that, but
that's true. It's true. As a kid, I could pitch, and I was pitching okay, and then you get a little bit older, and then all of a sudden, the other team is looking forward to having me pitch more than my own team, and it's true. It's like you have to. I was watching something today where I guess only 7% of all people that have ever played either baseball or softball growing up as kids ever make it to a professional level. At any, not professional, college level, at any level, whether it's a D3 school or a community college school, only 7% of all baseball, softball athletes ever make it to the college level. So my route to it was that I loved baseball growing up as a kid. I've told this story before. I'll tell it again. I had a 10th grade English teacher. I won't mention what her name is, but I didn't get along with my 10th grade English teacher. My father was a music teacher, and he always sided with my teachers. If I was doing something wrong, his thing was, I'm not getting called to school because your teachers are going to say, Mr. Schiff, your son is brilliant. No one's calling a parent to school for a 7:00 meeting. Mr. Schiff, you have a brilliant son, Lewis. But my English teacher and I didn't get along 10th grade. And I was always getting good. I was always a good writer, but 10th grade was a hiccup year. And my father went in to see my 10th grade English teacher. And I was a terrible speller, and I'm still a terrible speller. Okay. That's God bless spell check. He goes in and he meets with this teacher, and she says, he's not writing properly. He's a terrible speller. And my dad's like, yeah, forget about the spelling. What's wrong? He goes, all he wants to write about is baseball. And she said to him, you should take your son out of high school and enroll him in a trade school because it's just not going to come to anything. So I finished out the year in 10th grade. I got my C's, and then I got good grades in English for 11th grade and 12th grade and in college, and I got a journalism degree. So I majored in journalism, public relations specifically. I worked for the New York Yankees. I worked for Mr. Steinbrenner for 2 years in 1975 and 1976 doing public
Now
relations.
there's a book.
But see, so people say to me, well, tell me this George Steinbrenner story. And all I can tell you is he was the kindest, nicest man to me. He called me Louis. I hung out with his son, Hank, who unfortunately died a few years ago. Hank was a couple of years younger than me. And when I finished up my 1976 season as public relations director for the Yankees, he actually took Hank and I up to New York during the 76 season for Old Timers Day. I stayed at Mr. Steinbrenner's house in New York. We had the run of Yankee Stadium. We sat in with Phil Rizzuto while he was doing his play-by-play. We had the run of the stadium. I didn't realize at the time I was 21 years old and I was having a baseball dream that you can never repeat. And we go to Old Timers Day and there's Mickey Mantle there and all these guys that, just an incredible weekend in New York. And at the end of the 76 minor league season, he said to me, look, when you graduate college, what are you planning? I was at the University of Florida. And I said, well, I don't know. I may want to go to law school. And he said, look, I have a job for you in New York. So when you graduate, you finish up journalism school next year, come up to New York and we'll get you a job in New York doing public relations. I had family up there. But when I was getting ready to graduate and I got accepted to law school, my dad said, go to law school first, and then you can go work for the Yankees later. So I never went back to work for the Yankees, but over the years, I ran into him several more times. One great story, I had just gotten elected judge, and I was at a Yankee Marlins game down at Joe Robbie Stadium, and Mr. Steinbrenner was sitting a few rows in front of us behind the Yankee dugout, and my campaign manager was a retired New York City internal affairs police officer that worked in the Bronx. And in his New York accent, he was like, hey, Steinbrenner, prove it to me. I was like, so in between innings, I kind of walked down and I told the guard at the end of his row who I was. And Mr. Steinbrenner looked over to me and he waved me over and I sat down and we talked for about an inning about things. And I told him I was a judge and what I was doing. He congratulated me. And then I went back, afterwards and sat down next to Tony and my dad. And Tony was like, you really do know him? I go, well, why would I tell you I know the guy if I didn't know him? So I guess I could have worked for the Yankees, but baseball, you're hired to be fired. And as a And you are. You really, we all know that. People don't work for the same team their whole life unless they own the team. You're going to wind up going city to city and team to team. And so I'm really glad my dad convinced me to go to law school instead of work for the Yankees. So that's my background with writing baseball and my son was, when he was in college at the University of North Florida, he was working on a project and there was a book that he was reading called Only the Ball Was White. And it had to deal with the struggles of at the turn of the century and discrimination and about the ball players who played in the Negro Leagues. And I was teaching at Hamlin University Law School in the summer. I was doing a program called Our Lawyers Still Our Heroes. It was a program, we looked at video movies and we talked about the ethics of what was happening in the movies and how they parallel or don't parallel the law. I used to do that in the summer for a weekend class, and the dean asked me, do you have any ideas for another project? And I said, yeah, I've got this great idea that I kind of picked up from my son. And I told him, and they said, well, go ahead. It's only one credit. The students like you. So I taught it without a book. And then Bob Jarvis, God bless him, he finds out I'm teaching this class and he contacts me and goes, you want to write a book together? But it turns out he lives 5 miles from me at the time. So, I mean, what's the chance? So we collaborated and wrote, here's the book. It's not available anymore in print. It's available. It's like over 1,000 pages. And it's a book that's been used in law school on baseball law. I've jokingly said, and half of it's true, you could probably teach an entire first year curriculum of law school using nothing but baseball law cases. So that's how I got into it, just kind of like as a fun writing kind of assignment,
Yeah.
Chris. And I would do it. I would write at night.
Yep.
At court. My hobby was get home from work, eat dinner. We wrote the book from like 2006 to 2015. My son, I guess, graduated high school 2006, somewhere in there. So my responsibilities as being a home dad was changing, and I'd stay up till 2, 3 in the morning sometimes, sitting here at this computer, and my wife would come in and go, "Who are you talking to?" And I'd be on the phone because we didn't have Zoom then, talking to Bob and writing.
Right.
I wrote at night.
Wow.
It was a fun project.
No, for sure.
And this has been a fun project. And this book really is for baseball fans who want to know stories about that are not on plaque, attorneys, law students. It's a good book. If I didn't write this book and someone had published this book, I would have bought it. Seriously, I would have bought it because it's something I'm very interested in.
Yeah. Well, baseball is life. Life is baseball, you know? I mean, there's no reason why the two,
There are a lot of parallels.
very much so.
Yeah. A lot of rules, a lot of understanding. It's a fun game. You can go to a game with somebody and have a conversation as opposed to going to a basketball game or a football game or a hockey game, and you really can't talk. Baseball is relaxed. And when I go to a Marlins game, it's quiet because there's nobody there. When your Yankees came down, and I want to thank you on behalf of the Miami Marlins. I want to thank you for letting us sweep you this year. And that Sunday game, the Sunday game, Jeremy, look, you had a much better team than we did this year. But that Sunday game where we beat the Yankees had to be, for me, like the most exciting game that I saw this year. It just was, because you know that Yankee fans, and I'll say this because the Yankee fans always expect to win.
Yes.
They don't take losing matter of factly, and an 85 win season is not acceptable.
Yep. 100.
Yeah.
You want to fire half your squad because you didn't beat Toronto. Okay. If that was the Marlins, they would have had a parade for them for the fact that they almost made it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So Chris and I are both Yankee fans, so it's
And I won't talk about 2003 either.
Yeah,
because that was a fun year too.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So as we kind of wrap up here, just one of the little tidbits that I found very interesting is that out of the 300 and nearly 50 Hall of Famers that there are, only 11, as you said. So you're talking less than 3% in the Hall of Fame for baseball have a law background. So I found that very interesting.
Yeah. Not all of them practice law. Huggins, just real quickly, Huggins' father, Miller Huggins' father, insisted that he go to law school. And so he did. He fulfilled his father's wish, went to law school, and then told his dad, "Okay, I'm done." But he's in the Hall of Fame because of his managerial skills. And he also attributes the fact that the law school helped him tremendously as well. It doesn't hurt. Let's put it that way. It really doesn't hurt to have that advanced degree.
Because baseball is a mental game as well as any, a physical game. It's what's going on between the manager's ears. Those two managers are really duking it out in sort of a chess match.
Yep, it really
it's
3D chess, and I don't play 3D chess.
Yeah.
So in closing, I do have one last question that I'd love to hear your take on. Of the 11 Hall of Famers that have a law background in some way, shape, or form, who do you believe would be the toughest courtroom opponent?
John Montgomery Ward practiced, and he was a darn good lawyer. Tony La Russa never practiced, but I'm convinced that had he not gone the route that he did and become a world championship manager, he would have been a knockdown, drag out.
Oh God, yes.
No, he would have been a good lawyer. And it's preparation. I heard an interview. The Baseball Hall of Fame has podcasts that they drop every so often, and they just did an interview with him in the last couple of months after the book came out, and he talked about how he managed 18 half innings a game. It was batter, pitch by pitch, batter by batter.
Yeah.
That type of detail. So I would put him there with John Montgomery Ward as an attorney, because he had a tremendous legal career aside from his tremendous baseball career.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. So, Lou, we want to thank you for taking this time to meet with us, to be able to talk about this amazing book.
Thank you.
Let everybody know where they can get more content from you, more of your wonderful work.
So every day we put out on X and Blue Sky under Baseball and Law, or you can look up under Baseball and the Law. Either way, you'll find it. It's on Twitter or X, and it's on Blue Sky. I usually post around 6-7 o'clock in the morning. The content is pretty much the same. Blue Sky, I can add a couple extra words to it. So sometimes when I put something up on X, use my journalism degree to pare it down a little bit more. X, I get about 4 or 5 more words, I think, sometimes to describe things. And every day we post something, almost like a This Day in Baseball History type of thing. Sometimes it has to do with the law. Sometimes it has to do with cultural issues. So at the bottom of most of the tweets or posts, you'll see a hashtag and it says Baseball on the Law, and then there's a page number. The page number actually refers to the first book that Bob and I published, where you can find the information. So the first book, Baseball on the Law, Cases and Materials, that's published by Carolina Academic Press. That is still available. Their hard copies are hard to come by. They're out of print, but you can get the electronic version of the book, which I really enjoy for myself when I do some research, but you can find it quickly. And then the new book, Attorneys in the Baseball Hall of Fame, that's McFarland, and that's available through McFarland at right now, that 35% discount with the code HOLIDAY25 through December 1st. You can also get it on Amazon. You can get it on Barnes and Noble. There's a Kindle edition of the book that sells for, I think, $27.99 is the Kindle edition. You can have it this very moment. The regular book, the list price is $45, but with the discount now, it's just a little bit. It's about $35. It's about $35 out the door. I think McFarland is charging a $5 mailing fee. I saw the other day that if you have a Prime membership, it's free shipping, and if you bought 2 books, you got the third one free. They were offering, if you're an Amazon or a Barnes and Noble person and you get deep discounts, then by all means go wherever you can get the deepest discount.
Sure.
And I've done a lot of Sabre talk, so if I have any of my fellow Sabre members on here, aside from American Baseball Research, get in touch with me. You can find my information on the Sabre webpage as to the email and stuff. And I'll be happy to come by Zoom and talk to your chapter. And I was honored. The first book that Bob and I wrote received a Sabre Award for research. We were really, that was a cool thing. So I guess I can go back and tell my 10th grade English teacher I did go to a trade school. It was a journalism school, and I learned how to write. And I'm still writing about baseball, so too bad about it.
No, again, Lou, we want to thank you for joining us here at the Baseball Banter Broadcast. This has been a wonderful conversation. And if you are joining us here on the YouTube side of things, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, as it does truly help us continue to build this baseball community. And as always, being able to just spread the love of the game of baseball in one way, shape, or form or another. So again, thank you, Lou, for joining Chris and I, and we'll catch you guys on the next video.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.